I'll just put you on Do Not Disturb.
To this discussion of divestment. I would like to start today with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Princeton University is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Lenape-Hoking people and the Lenape people, and we pay respect and acknowledge peoples past, present, and future from the Lenape people and Lenape diaspora who are here. And I am Singshali. I'm class of 2012. I studied economics while I was here, and now I work in the climate space. I started a company called Joro that helps people track and manage their carbon emissions from everything they buy. And I live in Oakland, California, and I'm very happy to be back in Princeton. And I would like to start by introducing our panel. We have three wonderful alumni here who are part of the Divest Princeton community, starting with Graham Turt in 2017, who's the head of customer care at Green Mountain Power, an electric utility in Vermont. He leads Green Mountain Power's customer service team and manages innovative programs in areas such as electric vehicle charging, energy storage, and demand flexibility. He's helped Vermonters transition away from fossil fuels in a way that's beneficial to the grid. And
could you speak up some?
Yeah. Oh, you can't hear me?
No.
The microphone.
Yeah.
Why don't I move?
It's on.
Oh, wait, let me.
Can you hear me now? Great. So I'll start by reintroducing Graham, who's class of 2017. He works at Green Mountain Power, where he's the head of customer care. He helps Vermonters transition away from fossil fuels to clean energy. And Graham is a COS concentrator with a certificate in sustainable energy and a Fulbright scholar at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, where his research focused on local energy markets. Sujata Rajpurohit was class of 2021 at an MPA from Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. She's an associate now with the World Resources Institute. She focuses on modeling policies to decarbonize the economy in ways that reduce racial and economic inequality. Prior to WRI, she helped found a public charter school network and went to work in grant and project management at the International Rescue Committee. Hannah Reynolds, class of 2022, is a senior in the anthropology department from Finger Lakes, New York. She was co-coordinator of Divest Princeton this last year and has worked for Sitka Conservation Society on tongas policy in Alaska. She's graduating in a few days, and Hannah has just started work at New Jersey Future as a communications specialist promoting smarter land use and growth policies. And we are here today to talk about divestment, but before we dive into it, I'd like to invite everyone to take a few minutes to get to know the people in the room. So as a quick icebreaker, let's just take a few seconds and introduce yourself to the person that you're sitting next to.
Hi, I'm Bob.
I'm Sue.
Bob.
What class? 69. I just missed you. I'm 70. I started in the fall of 69. Yes. I'll tell you what, follow me home. We'll have a good place.
Hi, I'm Gary. Hi, I'm Sue. Hi, Bob. Bob and Lynn.
Thanks, everyone.
My class and the other custodian.
Thanks, everyone, for having me.
Sue took advantage of it.
But he's the real beneficiary, right?
I did. I took advantage of it. Good wish.
Thank you. I'm so glad everyone had a chance to connect with some folks sitting next to them. Reunions are always an amazing place to meet people new and old. And so we're here today to talk about the topic of divestment from fossil fuels. Why does this matter right now? I think everyone who's come to this talk probably acknowledges that the climate crisis is real and more urgent than ever before. The IPCC, the UN, says that we have just 7 years to reverse the effects of the climate crisis before 2030 to really cut emissions by 40 to 50% and keep us on track to stay within our 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius warming that could be really disastrous And already we're seeing the effects. I mean, I don't know if the Princeton weather machine is going to work today. Something might be off because of climate change. But generally, the climate crisis is realer than ever before, and actually financing is a really critical piece of why that's happening. Financing for fossil fuels is a key enabler for the fossil fueled economy. And Princeton's endowment is one of the 5 largest endowments in the United States. It's $38 billion this year. And over $1.7 billion of that is invested in fossil fuel companies, almost all of which is oil and gas companies. Also, Princeton has received over $26 million in research funding from fossil fuel companies, and approximately 50 fossil fuel companies are recruiting on campus. So fossil fuels are a big part of where Princeton's money goes, and Princeton's endowment is an enabler of fossil fuels. So this is not about vilifying people or communities who work in the fossil fuel economy. It's more about looking at the sources of funding and thinking about how can we redirect those to create a cleaner world, a more just and more sustainable world for all of us. Thanks. So I'm going to start today's panel by asking each of our panelists to come up and sort of answer a first question and give us about 5 minutes of their thoughts on a question relevant to them and their expertise. And then we're going to have more of an open discussion, and we'll welcome questions in the second half of the conversation. So to start with, I'd like to invite Graham up. And the question for you is, you're on the ground, seeing the green transition happening every day. How would divestment have an effect on that transition from your perspective? Is it just symbolic, or would it actually have an impact?
Thank you, everyone. First, I'm not used to talking to a room of actual people, so if everyone could just hold up a laptop. Congratulations, you all made it out to an event before noon, so you won. So I'm not, let me be clear, I'm not an expert in oil and gas.
Would you repeat the question, please?
Oh, yeah. So basically, it's whether divestment, what effect divestment would have on the ground. Is it just symbolic, or would it have an actual impact on how companies operate? And so I'm not an expert in oil and gas. I work in electric utility, but electric utilities and oil and gas companies operate very similarly in that they invest over very long time horizons. So if you look at an oil and gas company, they're putting millions of dollars now into exploration, finding new resources for oil and gas. That investment amortizes over 40 years, 50 years. So any action they're taking today, it is their fiduciary responsibility to protect it for the entire lifetime of that asset, which means they're going to fight like hell to prevent us from transitioning away from fossil fuels. It is their responsibility to shareholders. I would never expect a for-profit company to do something against its bottom line, and we shouldn't be naive like that either. So I think that there's a couple pieces here where when Princeton talks about divestment and why we wouldn't do it, a lot of the argument is we can remain associated with these companies, we can remain engaged, and by doing so, we can cause them to change. So hopeful that by being a shareholder, that means that we're engaged with these companies, we can get them to change what they do. The problem is that has never been how Princo operates. They're not an activist investor, and in fact, they have an explicit position against taking political stances in their investments. So the idea that Princo would all of a sudden change the way they operate so that we can force Exxon and BP to start investing in clean energy is kind of a farce. It's kind of like the fossil fuel equivalent of telling someone your freshman year that you're going to go grab a lunch with them. It's never going to happen. It's probably not a sincere request. But I think what's obvious is that the leverage we do have with our endowment is the size, is the prominence of Princeton, and versus I think a symbolic gesture where we're just paying lip service to some cause. Princeton is a really important institutional investor. As Charlie mentioned, a $38 billion endowment, one of the largest endowments in the country and the world for an educational institution. If we were to pull out money, if we were to make it clear that we're doing this to be consistent with Princeton's values, which are, as you've seen, plastered around campus to get to net zero by 2046, something that's wholly consistent with that, it would make a difference because we've seen that once one institutional investor divests, a lot follow. And if enough did it to the point where these companies' stocks, their assets were to become undesirable, no one was picking them up, their prices would be deflated, that makes a large difference because those prices are what impacts compensation for CEOs and executives. And if we remove the social license to operate from these companies, all of a sudden they become very undervalued. And then it would become in their best interest to transition. The only way we're going to do that is by taking the lead and pulling money out. There's no hope of saying we're going to continue to stay engaged. And it's even worse than it sounds, because not only when we remain invested in these companies, not only are we inhibiting decarbonization because we're not investing that money elsewhere in areas that could be really impactful, we are the reason that those companies fight against decarbonization. They do it with the justification that they're helping their shareholders. So as long as we have money in these companies, we are very much part of the problem. And I think that anytime you hear something that, oh, the only reason to affect change, the only way to affect change is by staying invested, by staying engaged, you have to remember how Princo has always operated. And remember that there's no instance where we've taken an activist investor position, where we've tried to sway board election votes, where we've tried to get companies to change. And that is, in my mind, the key, and why a lot of the engagement with the university has been frustrating, because they know that they're never going to take that position, and yet they continue to state it as a justification. So our call to action is to vote with your dollars, not donate until that divestment occurs. Because just like Princeton has a lot of power with their money, so do we as alumni. And as soon as alumni giving realizes that this is an issue that alumni care about, that they will not see donation dollars until this happens, you will see change happen very fast.
Thanks, Graham. Sujatha, the point of the endowment is to ensure future generations have access to the same Princeton we've all enjoyed. But how does divestment affect intergenerational equity as a concept?
I like the question.
It's really nice to be here with you all. It's also really nice to meet this intergenerational. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. It's great to be here with you all today. It's also really great to be in the presence of this fantastic community of intergenerational organizers that has kept up this campaign and kept up the pressure and brought us all together today. If we could take a moment to just do a round of applause for Divestment. I've been thinking a lot about the intersection of divestment and an educational institution and the endowment, right? What is it for? And when I think about that, I think a lot about my own experience. I attended an elite institution, in part thanks to an endowment, or significantly in part to an endowment. I'll never forget that my father didn't celebrate when I got my admission letter. He celebrated when we got the financial aid package. I was enrolled as a student, and I'll never forget it. He said,
It's hard to hear you. You speak a little closer.
"Can you hear me more?" Okay. Hi. I was saying, for me, an endowment was a life-changing thing. I attended an elite university because I was offered a scholarship. My father, when he received the letter, told me, he said, "I didn't fail you." And that stuck with me, right? That's what the endowment is for. It's meant to offer opportunity to subsequent generations. It's meant to expand horizons. It's meant to foment new discoveries and innovations. And we're an educational institution, and Princeton argues again and again that this is how we will contribute, that this is how we will make a difference. It will make a difference to its alumni, it says, and I'm one of them. All of you are too. It will make a difference through its discoveries, and it refuses to acknowledge the other ways in which it can and must make a difference. At this point, climate change is no longer a technological problem. We have the solutions necessary to take the steps we need to over the next 8 years to make the emissions reductions we need to. It is not an economic problem. These technologies are not overly costly. It would take something like 2% of GDP to get us to 2030, spending a year, right? That's manageable. This is not asking people to suffer unduly. This is a problem of politics. It is a problem of imposing costs on the powerful. There are very few people who stand to benefit from a continued fossil fuel economy. There are many of us who stand to gain from a cleaner one. But as long as we remain invested in these companies, as Graham so well described, we will be part of the people holding back action. And we are holding back action. The American Petroleum Institute is lobbying against financial disclosure rules. They are lobbying against cities that want to electrify and remove gas, or want to electrify buildings as they are built. These are having active consequences now, and the consequences that they have right now, it doesn't matter where we are in 10 years, it doesn't matter if they liquidate those positions 10 years from now, because the damage will be done. The university exists primarily as an intellectual institution, and it begins to acknowledge its material ones when it points to its sustainability plan, which is woefully short and woefully small. The sustainability plan doesn't include travel and employees, last I checked. Admitting that it has this power, admitting that we wield this power, is the first step. All of us here in this room wield this power. I think so often in the face of climate change, which is such a wicked, massive problem, we ask ourselves what we can do. And the first thing, the best thing that I did when I got here was to look around at the people around me, and they were like, maybe we can do this. And we can do this. Princeton says it's complicated. It says it can't unwind positions. It made 48% returns last year. It's like, I don't know what year it suffered a loss in. It didn't suffer like 1 year in the Great Depression. These people are incredibly talented at their jobs. If you have to go in divestment order, they will make it happen. And the sooner we send the signal, the faster financial markets can adjust. The sooner we do this, the less the damage is, the longer we wait, the worse it is. When we look towards the future, we have everything to gain and so much to lose. You cannot have intergenerational equity when you don't have a stable food system. You cannot pass on a house if the land that it stands on has disappeared into the sea. And it is, and it will. And we know this. It says it believes its researchers act like it. You have scholars here who have spelled out the consequences, and the university makes committees and delays and obfuscates rather than listening to the clear implication of its work. It accepts monies from these funders, and then it helps greenwash their reputations. I think one of my favorites is the Net Zero report, which Jesse Jenkins is a fantastic professor if you haven't taken the class. It receives funding from ExxonMobil and from petroleum companies. And its clear implication is that we need to act, and this professor devotes so much of his effort to advocating for action. And yet, the very funders of this research are trying to delay and trying to stymie this. I can give no clear metaphor for it. Princeton can't say that it's committed to a sustainable planet while remaining invested in these companies. Please join us, please follow, please get involved however you feel suits you best.
Thank you, Sujata. And Hannah, you've spent the last 4 years on Princeton campus, and the last 3 years deeply involved in Divest Princeton work every single day. What does it mean to actually be working with the university on divestment? Can you tell us a little bit about what that process of working with the bureaucracy is like?
Yeah, thank you all for being here, and thank you both for your really insightful responses. I kind of want to start by just contextualizing how long this process has been going on. So it's been 2 months since the Council for the Princeton University Community announced that they have $1.7 billion invested in fossil fuels. It's been 3 months since Divest Princeton filed a legal complaint with the state of New Jersey Attorney General alleging that the university's endowment is violating its fiduciary responsibility to ethically invest in the good of the public. It has been a year since our Divest Princeton referendum was passed by 82% of approval within the undergraduate student government. It's been 2 years since we first submitted our proposal to the Resources Committee pushing for divestment, starting the Divest Princeton campaign. But it's been 6 years the time before that, 7 years for the proposal before that, and 9 for the proposal before that. So it's been nearly a decade, which is almost half my life, that there's been fossil fuel divestment organizing happening on this campus. And still, there's been no concrete action taken by the university at this point. There's been no commitment to divestment. There's still just continued processes that we've been going through, that have been invented to stall action on climate change. So something that I think has really stood out to me is over the past 3 years, like we've accumulated over 3,000 signatures on our no donations till divestment pledge, which you can reach at our website that's on the board, www.divestprinceton.com. And so that's something that, like, we have a critical mass of, students, alumni, faculty who all support our campaign. We have 160 faculty who signed on to our open letter that was written by faculty, by a coalition of faculty who are pro-divestment and are supportive of our campaign. And still, these academics, these top scientists, top policymakers are supporting divestment, but still Princeton's unwilling to act. And I think that something that's really stood out is we've gone through the whole process. We've gone through the resources committee. They made recommendations to the board of trustees. The board of trustees put forward a conditional divestment from coal and tar sands, but failed to acknowledge oil. There were a lot of loopholes for even coal and tar sands to not be actually divested from. And they're still, willing to invest in companies like Exxon and BP that are known for climate misinformation. And so at this point, we've still just seen continued delay, continued stonewalling, refusal to engage with student activists and alumni activists like myself and others up here. And in the face of the climate crisis, we still see just continued delay. This past fall, they created a faculty panel and an administrative committee that did not previously exist to make it even harder for divestment to pass. We went through all of the processes and they continue to delay and they continue to make more bureaucratic loopholes and obstacles that make it really hard for divestment to happen. And I think that something that really has been really central to all of this has just been the support of the alumni and the faculty and the students that have all been, pushing for this, fighting for our futures. As a 21-year-old looking at the rest of my career, it's kind of daunting. And I think that, as we know, climate change is a really big thing, but it's already reaching New Jersey. Last fall, we've had a tornado touch down in Princeton, and we had to shelter in place in the basement, but the basements were flooding with flash flooding. And that was as a result of Hurricane Ida, which is associated with climate change. So I think at this point, it's just completely disheartening to see Princeton continue to stall, continue to delay, and to have to go through these bureaucratic obstacles day after day. But I'm really optimistic because look at this great showing we have here. Look at the 3,000 people who have signed on to our pledge. And look at all these. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, all three of you. I also wanted to just point out that Princeton isn't the only place where divestment campaigns have been happening. This year, Harvard announced it would divest its endowment from fossil fuels. Boston University, the UC school system did last year. There's several universities across the country that are already taking this action, and most of them are citing fiscal responsibility as the reason for divestment, because fossil fuels are not a good long-term investment, and endowments are long-term investments. And so even from a financial perspective, I think endowments across the country are waking up, and then also from sort of a moral and philosophical perspective, the endowment is a very unique investment vehicle that represents all of us and all of our interests and the interests of future generations. So I just really wanted to emphasize that point and thank all of you for giving such sort of different perspectives on why divestment is important. I think we had initially planned to do some Q&A between us, but given the mic situation, I wonder if maybe we should just go to audience questions. And we have one in the back.
Hi, so two questions, or really straightforward questions. So the comptroller for New York State committed that they're going to divest, and they have a huge portfolio for pension funds. The comptroller of New York City had also committed to divest. And so my question is,
says no, given every opportunity. There was actually a platform created just for this. Harvard before Divestment was part of it. California Divestment was part of it. I think it's called the Climate Action 100. Princeton declined. I think one of the few critical quotes on record was him saying, no, we will not be participating in that. It does not fit with the aforementioned conception of Princeton's obligations in this sense.
I just came from the 11 o'clock panel, which unfortunately Steve Robert.
We'll repeat it.
We can repeat it.
Yeah. We'll repeat
11
it.
o'clock panel, which is interesting, so I apologize if you've already answered this question. But someone mentioned that that Princeton is not scheduled to be climate neutral until 2046. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Any comment?
And easily.
So that is correct. That is the target, to get to net zero. However, I think it's important that when we talk about divestment, we don't necessarily mean divestment overnight either. It would be impossible, fortunately, for Princeton to become operationally zero carbon tomorrow. You wouldn't have heat or electricity on campus, and we all acknowledge that. It's the path to get there. And just like there's a path to build geothermal heating and to purchase more renewable energy, there's a path to become divested from these companies that would involve first divesting from the most egregious, setting up a plan to not renew partnerships, research partnerships with Exxon and BP. It doesn't have to happen overnight, but we need to see a goal. We need to see actual progress towards that goal. And I think the other piece that, not exactly related, but I wanted to hit, was that I think there's a misconception that people pushing for divestment don't like the university, that they hate Princeton. I love this school. I would love to be able to donate in good faith and feel that my money is being used to expand opportunity and not go towards financing the climate crisis. I might threaten to donate to Harvard.
I have a short statement leading to a question. So just by background, my name's Bob Massey. I was class of 1978. In the spring of 1978, we managed to launch major protests against South African divestment, against the eating clubs, and against our connection to poor working practices down in the South. Now, I have a lot of passion about this because this basically determined the rest of my career, and partly out of interest in what are the relationships between institutions and their investments, and particularly the legitimacy or non-legitimacy of the kind of answers that you've been getting. I spent 5 years at Harvard Business School specializing in these questions of finance. So as I listen to the answers that have been given about South Africa, about fossil fuel, I can say that they are almost uniformly bullshit. And it's really important to hear that, because they're clouded in a lot of fancy sounding language, and this and that, and commingled funds and long-term returns and discount rates and things like that. But for people who are professionally engaged with finance, almost all of these things can be addressed or just false arguments. So you got to keep fighting. I want to say Princeton did one of the best letters I saw among I tend to be asked to comment on this all over the country, and Princeton did a wonderful job. However, here comes the question. There is a limit to this kind of conversation, whether it's engagement. I ran a group called Series, which was all about engagement. It worked well under some circumstances. Under other circumstances, it is employed for delay. And on the issue of fossil fuel, where minutes count, where the record is of deliberate, aggressive deception and every possible avenue to slow things down, I think the time is for more direct action. So in the spring of 1978, 200 of my classmates took over Nassau Hall as part of our protest around South African investment. By the way, again, sorry to blow my own horn, but I wrote an 800-page book on South Africa and U.S. and South Africa, which clearly lays out in detail how that unfolded. And Bill McKibben, a very close friend of mine, read that book and called me prior to launching the divestment campaign. So there's been good learning. They're not the same. But I think you should be thinking about sleeping somewhere they don't want you to sleep. Nonviolent civil disobedience. I mean, it's not like you're disputing something relating to when exams are, something that may be very important to a local community. This is a 30-year delay in confronting a force which is already destroying the planet and gives a lie to the very motto that we're supposed to live by. Now, I realize in order to turn down the Bob Massey fire hose right now, I will just say I want to continue to be available to all of you and all of you. I mean, because it really is true. If I'm just one person here, there's so much other talent, legal talent, historical talent, financial talent, organizing passion, stretched across the entire university experience. So my email is RKMASSIE. Yeah, put it up there. And if you want, I mean, we want to help. You guys are driving it, but I urge you to up the ante. You know, give us a call worthy of the problem. And we're all busy, but we will get at gmail.com. We'll get less busy. You're getting there. We'll get less busy if we believe we're being asked to do something important, which you have done for us. Ask more. Ask with more urgency. Get us out of our chairs. Remind us who we were when we were here. Remind us what's at stake. And people like me can help with pathways and strategies and stuff like that, because we've been around this block many, many times.
We can bring our sleeping bags.
We can bring our sleeping bags. Yeah, by the way. I used my degree from Harvard Business School to sit in the alumni office at Harvard. So, you know, let's keep going. And thank you very much for tolerating my comment. But I really want to see this cranked up a couple notches because they're bullshitting you. And they're just waiting for you to graduate or move away or get, you know, last thing. People expect fiduciary duty to act, when they say it, to act like a Hogwarts spell. Fiduciary duty is, and then you're supposed to shut up and go away. As I believe it was Justice Frankfurt said, the invocation of fiduciary duty is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of it, and there is nothing barring Princeton under New Jersey or United States law from doing any of this. And that's just for starters. Okay, thank you for your patience. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question and then give some background. The goal, of course, is to move away from carbon. Do something that's... The goal is to move away from carbon and to get to something that's perhaps better. And one way is to divest from companies that provide carbon as a form of energy. Another way is to apply a carbon tax. Okay? And the reason I say that is because I worked in the NBA for 44 years in research. In research, they never said that we are a fossil fuel company. They always said, we're an energy company. And my company had the largest geothermal energy business in the world. We did photovoltaics. We found nuclear sometimes when we drill, but we decided nuclear is too risky, right? So the energy business has a 5 to 10% decline every year. There's massive cash flow, and they apply the cash flow to bring more carbon out, or providing some other alternative, photovoltaics we looked at, right? Geothermal we did. Uranium we did. So if you have the carbon tax to bring it up to the point where then these other things become economic. But the companies for fiduciary responsibility are not going to say, hey, to our shareholders, we are now going out of business. We're going to spend our money in a way that's going to eliminate profits and not out of business, right? But we're always going to do research to see what in the future we can provide energy with, because it's massive cash flow and our depletion curve is 5 to 10% per year. And if we don't stimulate that well, we don't get any more oil out, right? You can't hold it up. So you got to put that money into something. And so if you have a carbon tax, say, okay, we're on carbon, then there's something
request from every fossil fuel company under the sun. It was those who have not made plans to decarbonize on path with Princeton's own commitments, which is under the IPCC targets. So if there were a hypothetical company that were investing heavily in geothermal and solar on a path that took them to that same goal, I would love to remain invested in them and support them and let them take us there.
And my company's engaged in carbon sequestration business in work. We sequester more carbon dioxide than anybody else. So there are alternatives, but it's got to be economic. Yeah, otherwise it won't work.
I would just say, unfortunately, the ones we are associated with are not in that category. I'd say when a company like Exxon spends more on marketing its partnership with Princeton about carbon capture than actually funding the research that defines greenwashing.
Talk about Class A. So just to go further from what Mr. Massey was saying, I think we used the word divestment first for companies involved in South Africa. I just asked a couple of questions. So one, or maybe statements and questions like everybody else. One, taking care of the university and its students is not possible and still investing ethically. That is a false choice. Second, this is not the only instance where a university uses that excuse or uses that goal to maintain its status quo. For example, I went to medical school at Columbia. Well, Columbia's attitude then and now was as their goal was to be a tertiary academic medical center, and the neighborhood began. So they're in Washington Heights, where the life expectancy is decades below the people that work in the medical center. It's the students there who have initiated community health clinics, not the faculty, not the medical center, not the university, and that's not where it should be. So I'm happy you're here, but I'm very disappointed that this is not a panel of faculty, that President Eisenhower is standing at the podium saying, we are an ethical university. Question might be, looking back too many years, starting with South Africa, here now with climate change, it's the argument is atomized, and I'm concerned that you're always going to be sort of not have good enough footing when it's one topic after another. So it was South Africa, here it's global climate change. There's been many things in between. I'm sure there'll be things in the future. Should we change the argument not to one topic or another, but it's all the topics, that all investing should be ethical in all universities, that all universities should be able to support their students and their research without investing in things that we would find unethical like on Earth. So I agree with this as one passion, but there are many, and I think putting them all together as a more global argument for how universities should operate may have better traction for this topic and others in the future.
Hi, I can respond to this a little bit. I really appreciate everything you said. I completely agree that there are so many issues that are so related and like they keep coming up, and something that I think that I can speak to is the process with the CPUC and the Resources Committee. And when we're going through that, they require a bunch of kind of arbitrary things, but like processes that otherwise our proposal would have never been considered if we didn't have really specific goals and targets. And so they required like sustained interest on this specific issue of fossil fuel divestment over a long period of time, and collective like an understanding that this is like an urgent issue that like really matters to the students and alumni. And I think it's harder to establish that just as like a general ethical investing type thing, but that's definitely something that we really value, and we try to support other campaigns when they come up, especially like progressive campaigns for other divestment movements. We supported like private prison divestment in the past, things like that. And I think something else is just that, oh sorry, I totally forgot what I was going to say for a second. But yeah, I think that in general, our mission is to push for transparency and accountability within the university and the whole bureaucracy itself. And so something that like we really value is like, trying to have transparency on the board of trustees and how they work and how they're elected and things like that. And really targeting the sources of power, the structures of power at this university. And so that's something that's a bigger part of Divest Princeton that I think will remain even when and hopefully if Princeton divests from fossil fuels. I think this will be something that doesn't go away.
I just wanted to add one more thing to that. I was also at Harvard Business School, and when I was there, we were working on the divestment campaign for fossil fuels, and we were working alongside the private prisons divestment movement. We ended up creating a joint group trying to divest from fossil fuels and private prisons, and that actually worked less well there. The problem that the university cited to us was that then it became this slippery slope argument, and then next they would have to divest from fast food. And so it became, that was like their question was, if right now it's climate change and private prisons, what's next? Like, you don't like a company, then we don't have to invest in it. So in some ways, I would really like if there were some more policy and institutional ways that university endowments in particular would be recognized as sort of public benefit investment corporations, and there was some legal structure for that, like there is at the corporate level. But for now, because there isn't that sort of policy level vehicle that recognizes a certain type of fund as having a certain type of investment approach required, I think sometimes it can be challenging to lump together different types of divestment movements, and in some ways could water them down. I'm not sure though. I mean, it would be really interesting to try different approaches, but from the experience at Harvard, they ended up separating them, and then ultimately they're still fighting for the private prison divestment, and actually that's not going well. They ended up taking action against certain students who were part of that divestment movement, and it's been really challenging at the university.
You've been really patient. Oh, sorry. Just one right there first.
Carla Conley, Class of 01. I'm currently a lawyer advising endowments and universities who are trying to find these mission-aligned investments and trying to respond to the divestment. And I would really echo what some of the gentlemen said, that I was at an endowment conference focused on university endowments, and the question came up, you're getting all this pressure from student groups, and the answer the investment manager gave was, they'll be gone in 4 years, just ride it out. So it really does come to bear on the alumni to put that pressure on. So when we're thinking about fiduciaries, the obvious decision here of whether they're going to vote to approve the proposal or not lies with the board. We all vote on our alumni board members. Do you have sort of a lobbying plan where you know where the current board members stand? You were talking about some insight into how board members are appointed, how the investment committee members are selected. And have you ever thought about doing a campaign where you would contact proposed board members and put out a slate so those of us who are voting can understand where they stand on key issues like this?
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm just going to draw a black box, because that's basically how it's...
Yeah. So Lynn over here, one of our great organizers from the class of '87, did a lot of really great research into the Board of Trustees last year, and how they operate and how they're elected and things like that. And currently, our board is only 1/3 of our board is elected, and 2/3 of the board is self-appointed. So it's really hard to get a majority, the critical majority we need to be able to pass things like divestment within the board, if they already are opposed to divestment and want to appoint people who are also opposed to things like divestment. At the same time, there's a lot of, there's no transparency really with like how our elections, or like how votes on different subjects pass. So like, there's not even really a very formal like process about how like people, how decisions are made and how they're voting. There's no formal records. There's no formal records of who are on which committees, and that's not something that's public information. Which means there's just like no transparency. It's very hard to do the things that like Yale and Harvard have done with like Harvard Forward and Yale Forward. And another thing, so like there's a young alumni trustee election, and every year we've kind of like the past couple of years have kind of pushed for, progressive candidates who are really pro divestment, but the thing is they're not allowed to campaign, and neither are any of the other alumni that run through the elections. They're not allowed to campaign, they're not allowed to comment on any issues, they're not supposed to have opinions on any issues. So I have a friend who ran, and I ran, and we weren't allowed to say anything about divestment or anything like that. And so it's a process that's very hard to work around, but it's definitely something that's really important and something we're kind of continuing to try to push for, especially as we're continuing with divestment as well.
Question. Is there a course available to students, a national course, on the ins and outs of all this? Because if there's not, I can imagine organizing one with many others that would walk people through all these details and use certain schools as case examples and bring people up to speed at a much higher rate. So I don't think that's a good idea, but perhaps it would start to answer some of the concerns.
So we have the website, which has a lot of great information on the processes that we have. And it's not like a formal course, but there's a lot of information about how we've done everything and how other schools have done this work. Are we?
Yeah. Can we go? You've been waiting very patiently.
I was just on the panel on the other end of the building on climate change, which is by far the best attended panel yet. Now I have a very profound question. What the hell are the lights doing on in this room with all this? Can someone please turn the lights on?
No, we did. You had one.
There is.
Hi, Hannah Heineken. I graduated 2003, and I am an environmental attorney. I work on climate change, specifically against the fossil fuel companies and their financiers. So this hits very close to home. I also started my activism at Princeton. So this is amazing what you guys have done, and very much wanting to support you further. I do just have a couple comments and questions. One, some people raised the question of engagement. Engagement does not work, especially with these big fossil fuel companies. You can look into it further. There's been plenty of research. They just completely ignore it. It's useless. I think one of the things that I actually recently commented on President Eisgruber's message to alumni regarding all the efforts that Princeton is doing on climate change. So you can look it up online. One of the things that I was particularly concerned about is this Net Zero America study, which if you have looked at it, 4 of the 5 scenarios that they put forward are completely reliant on carbon capture and storage. And if you look at it further, that means all these massive pipelines and whatnot crisscrossing around the U.S., predominantly probably in low-income communities. It has never been proven to work at that scale. A lot of the carbon capture and storage technologies are currently being used to recover more oil and further fossil fuel extraction. So this is all kind of these fossil fuel companies that Princeton is associating with are pitching these new technologies as the solution when it's only going to fuel the problem. And so I think I have a question for you folks in terms of, what is your view of this Net Zero America study? What is your view about these false solutions? I think also, I think we touched on it here, but, what are the true roadblocks that you are seeing in terms of trying to advance this conversation? I think, the analysis that you've done in terms of the conflict of interest with the trustees is amazing. I would love to see more direct action. I've been doing direct action for a long time. It's really the only thing that works and gets on people's nerves. If you can speak a little bit more on that, that would be great. Thank you.
perform that study are necessarily ideologically committed to fossil fuels. I think it's always tricky because these companies fund research that can be really important, but it's about the motivation behind why they're funding it that is. That study happens to be funded by Exxon. I don't know, how much stock to take in that. And I do know the researchers mentioned earlier, who is a great researcher and really does care. He was on a Jon Stewart TV show recently. He was good. But I think we just have to be mindful of why companies are partnering with Princeton, right? Is it to make a good faith effort to find the solution, or is it to use the Princeton crest as a shield against criticism? I think it's way more often that it's the latter. And in fact, they're using those partnerships as a reason to deflect blame, to delay action, to say, look, we're partnered with Princeton, the most prestigious school in the country. We're working on carbon capture, we're modeling decarbonization pathways, so stop telling us what we have to do because we're already doing it. Meanwhile, you look at how they actually invest capital, and it is a fraction of 1% that goes into research into those types of things. The rest is new oil exploration, it's pipeline development, and that's what matters. And I think the direct engagement works. It has worked in the past, but not donating is probably the most effective thing for alums to do because we're not here. We can be here for 3 days of the year, but we're not here the rest of the time. At least I'm not. I live in Vermont. It's really far away. And so writing that down, and every time I engage with alumni giving, I tell them why I'm not giving. I send them back a card, and it says, I'm giving $ because, and I write 0, I cross out because, I write until Princeton divests from fossil fuels. And they notice, they ask me why, they try to highlight all the great action that Princeton's doing, but as we've heard many times, it's a little bit of BS. So I think it's really important that when you make that decision, you make it clear why you're taking it, and they will notice. If a critical mass of the alumni community stops giving money back to the school, that will change things very quickly. So that's what, as an alum, I would encourage everyone here to do.
Thank you everyone so much for joining. And we're going to wrap the session now to give everyone a little time to go to whatever you're going to next. But before we do, I want to make sure to tell everyone, go to the website, sign the pledge, no donations until divestment, tell your class, talk to people about it while you're here at reunions. If you see Chris Eisgruber, please talk to him about it. If you see any board members or trustees, please tell them about it. And also, there's also a legal complaint that you can sign as well on the website.
There's one more announcement.
And one more.
Oh, and also please follow on social media on Instagram. And there's also a social tonight from 4 to 6 if you want to meet more people in this community and talk more about divestment.
And we'll stick around if anyone has other questions.
Wait, where is it? Tell them where it is.
Tonight at 4 o'clock at Frist MPR.
And tell them about Eisgruber tomorrow morning. And encourage them, everybody in the room, to come and ask him the question. When is the Eisgruber? 10:30. 10:30.
Where is it?
Tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. there's a session with Chris Eisgruber, and everyone should go and ask him about divestment.